I've met my share of difficult neighbors, but none quite like Karen's. See, I live just past the Meadows subdivision, one of those picture-perfect communities where everyone's lawn looks copy-pasted and the mailboxes match like soldiers in formation. My farm sits right at the edge, outside their HOA lines. Technically, that means I'm free from their rules, no fines, no leaf inspections, no approved paint colors. At least that's what I thought. It was a Saturday morning, and I was repairing the chicken coop when I heard the sound of heels clacking on gravel. That's never a good sign on a farm. I turned around, and there she was. Bob, bright pink blazer, clipboard under her arm, holding a latte like it was an extension of her personality. She had that kind of smile that looks polite but feels like a threat. "Good morning," she called out like we'd been friends for years. I nodded. "Morning, can I help you with something?" She looked around, squinting at my barn like she was inspecting it for an HOA violation. Then she said the line that should warned me what kind of trouble she was about to bring. "We've chosen your farm as the perfect venue for my wedding." I blinked. "You've chosen what now?" She smiled wider, clearly enjoying my confusion. "We've been scouting for weeks. Maya and I are hosting the community wedding, rustic, charming, and," she gestured at my property, "so authentic." I almost laughed. "Ma'am, this is a working farm, not a wedding venue." She waved that off. "Oh, don't worry, we'll handle everything. Set up, clean up, decorations, we've got a professional planner, all you need to do is sign the release." She reached into her clipboard and handed me a stack of papers with legal print, so small it looked like it could double as wallpaper. I didn't even touch it. "Lady, I think you've got the wrong idea. I'm not part of your HOA, you can't just pick my farm like it's a park rental." Her smile twitched. "Oh, we'll take care of that, I'm the HOA president, we'll work it out." I shook my head. "You can't work out what you don't own." She let out a small, patronizing laugh like I was some child refusing to share my toys. "You'll change your mind once you see the community benefits, and besides," she looked down at my boots caked with mud, "it could be a nice chance for you to clean the place up." I felt my jaw tighten. She turned on her heel, already typing on her phone as she walked back toward her shiny white SUV. "We'll be in touch," she called over her shoulder. I watched her drive off, rooster crowing behind me like it knew trouble had just arrived. That evening, I told my buddy Hank about it over a beer. He nearly spit his drink out laughing. "She said she's what? Your barn for her wedding?" "Oh, yep. She are you. And nope." He smirked. "Then she's gonna learn what private property means the hard way." I wanted to believe it was just talk, that she'd come to her senses. But the next morning, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Two men were standing in my field, holding measuring tape and taking photos of the barn. I walked out there and said, "Can I help you?" One of them looked up. "You the owner?" "Last time I checked." "Karen sent us, we're mapping out the layout for the wedding tent." I stared at him. "You realize you're trespassing, right?" He looked genuinely confused. "Karen said she got permission." I pointed toward the road. "Karen doesn't own this land, I do, now get off it before I call the sheriff." They left grumbling, but the damage was done. Karen wasn't joking. I called her that afternoon. She answered on speaker, her voice all sugar and superiority. "Oh, I was just going to call you," she said. "We're finalizing the plans." "No, you're not," I said flatly. "You and your people step one more foot on my farm and I'll have you arrested." There was a pause, just long enough for me to picture her fake smile cracking. Then she said, "You don't want to do that. This is a community event. It'll raise property values." "Mine's fine as it is," I said and hung up. That night, a flyer appeared taped to my mailbox. It read, "Community wedding hosted by HOA President Karen and Jeff. Venue, the farm." And right there in bold letters at the bottoms, "Special thanks to local resident Mr. Walker for his generosity in providing the venue." That's my name. My jaw hit the ground. It wasn't just arrogance anymore, it was theft. And as I stood there holding that flyer under the porch light, I realized something. She wasn't going to stop. Not until I made her. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of engines in my driveway, not one but 3 trucks. I stepped out onto the porch and nearly dropped my coffee. There they were again, Karen's people hauling boxes of decorations, folding chairs, and string lights like they were moving into Disneyland. I shouted, "Hey, who told you you could unload that here?" One of the guys, a kid barely out of college with a clipboard, said, "Ma'am, Sir Karen said you approved the setup. The HOA's covering all expenses." Approved, I walked right up to the truck. "Buddy, I don't even belong to your HOA." He frowned like I'd just told him gravity stopped working. "Wait, what?" She said this whole field was community property. I didn't bother arguing, I just pointed to the gates. "Turn around now." The poor guy looked relieved. "Actually, I'll call her." "Oh, please do," I said. Not 10 minutes later, her white SUV rolled up, spotless as ever. The door swung open and Karen climbed out in full HOA battle mode, clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, heels clicking like a judge entering court. She didn't even look at me. She walked right past, barking orders to the workers. "The tent goes on the north end near the barn, oh, and make sure the flower arch faces the sunset." "Karen," I barked. She turned, feigning surprise. "Oh, you're here. You mean on my land?" She sighed as if I were a child interrupting her meeting. "We've discussed this. It's a community event. The HOA board voted unanimously to hold it here. You'll be compensated with," she flipped through her notes, "a public appreciation mention and a small maintenance stipend." I blinked. "You're offering me what, $50 and a pat on the back?" She smiled that same cold smile. "Exposure, Mr. Walker. It's about exposure. People will see your property in a new light." "Lady," I said, stepping closer, "if anyone else steps foot on this farm, they'll see it from the other side of a fence." She laughed, the sound dripping with condescension. "Oh, you don't mean that. You wouldn't want to seem unneighborly." I said nothing, just stared, long enough that her smirk faltered for half a second. Then she turned away, still confident, still sure she'd win. "We'll revisit this later," she said, sliding into her car. "I'll send you the formal notice tonight." And she did. That evening, I found a printed envelope shoved under my door, official HOA letterhead. Inside was a document that made my blood boil. It read, "Notice of Temporary Event Use Approval. As part of the Community Enhancement Program, your property has been designated for limited, short-term public access. The event will be conducted under HOA oversight and will not interfere with essential farm operations." It wasn't even signed by a government office, just Karen and her board members. I could framed it as the world's boldest piece of fiction. So I drove down to the county clerk's office the next morning, letter in hand. The clerk took one look and started laughing. "This isn't legal," she said. "She can't authorize anything on land outside her jurisdiction." "Can you make that official?" I asked. She printed me a stamped statement right there, proof my property wasn't under HOA control. That afternoon, I drove back home and posted a big wooden sign by the gate. "Private property, TRESBASSERS will be reported." For good measure, I stapled the county's verification letter to it. Problem solved, right? Not even close. The following morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Hank. "You seen this?" He sent a photo. It was a flyer taped up all over town. "You're invited, Sweating of the Year hosted by HOA President Karen and Jeff, venue the farm." There were sponsors listed, a local bakery, a floral shop, even a DJ service. And at the bottom, once again in fancy lettering, "Special thanks to Mr. Walker for providing his beautiful property for this joyous occasion." My property. Without asking. That's when I realized Karen wasn't just trying to host a wedding. She was trying to claim my farm as part of her empire. That evening, I stood by the barn, watching the sunset bleed into the hills. My fence, my field, my work, it all suddenly felt like a target. I knew she'd be back, the kind of person Karen was, she didn't hear the word no. And when people like that don't listen, sometimes you have to make them. By the time the weekend rolled around, I'd had enough. Karen's flyers were still plastered all over town, and people kept driving by slow, staring at my property like it was already booked for some celebrity wedding. One couple even pulled up to my gate asking for venue rates. That was it. If Karen wanted a venue, I'd give her one with a 10-foot fence around it. Saturday morning, I loaded my pickup with lumber, posts, and nails. I spent the entire day hammering boards into the dirt, creating a solid barrier along my property line. By sunset, I was drenched in sweat, but it felt good. For once, I was taking control. I even hung a new sign on the gates. Private property, no HOA access, no WDDNGS, ALLOWED. It was petty, sure, but after what she'd pulled, I figured she earned it. Sunday was quiet, no trucks, no planners, no Karen, just me, my fields, and the faint sound of crickets. For a moment I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd given up. Then Monday came. I woke up to the sound of metal clanging. At first I thought one of my cows had broken through the corral, but when I stepped outside I froze. Half my fence was gone. Clean cut, every post sawed down. And standing on the other side, half in my field, half in the HOA's freshly mowed grass, was Jeff, Karen's, holding a pair of bolt cutters. "Morning," he said like we were old friends. I marched toward him. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He smiled nervously. "Karen said the fence was, temporary. We're setting up decorations this week." "Temporary?" I pointed at the missing boards. "Buddy, that was my property line. You're trespassing." He held up a clipboard as if that made it okay. "She filed an event permit with the HOA, everything cleared." I snatched the clipboard from his hand. "This isn't a government permit, this is a piece of paper with her name on it." He looked helpless. "Hey man, I'm just following orders." "Well, follow them back off my land," I said, jabbing a finger toward the road. He hesitated. "You sure you want to make her mad? Karen can be," he trailed off. "I'm already mad," I said, "and I've got the sheriff on speed dial." That got him moving. He muttered something under his breath, climbed into his truck, and peeled out. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was Karen. "Mr. Walker," she said, her voice sugary and smug, "I just heard there was a misunderstanding with my—" "Misunderstanding," I said. "He destroyed my fence." "Now let's not exaggerate. It was encroaching on community property. We're simply restoring access." "Community property?" I snapped. "You're insane. This land has been in my family for 3 generations. You don't own an inch of it." "Oh, please don't get emotional," she sighed. "It's all perfectly legal. My lawyer reviewed the paperwork." I took a breath. "Karen, if you or your people step one more foot onto my farm, I'll press charges. I mean it." There was silence on the other end. For a moment I thought she'd back down, then I heard it, that soft, infuriating chuckle. "You're adorable when you try to sound tough," she said and hung up. That night I sat on my porch staring at the line where my fence used to stand. The moonlight hit the broken boards like a warning. I knew calling the cops wouldn't stop her. People like Karen didn't fear rules, they used them. So I started thinking differently. If she wanted to play dirty, fine. I grew up on a farm, I invented dirty. The next morning I called Hank. "Hey," I said, "you still got that backup irrigation pump from last season?" "Sure do, why?" I leaned back, grinning at the horizon. "Let's just say I'm about to test how much pressure it can handle." He paused. "You're not thinking what I think you're thinking, are you?" "Oh, I'm way past thinking," I said. He laughed. "You're gonna need help." "Good," I told him. "Bring gloves." As I hung up, I saw something across the field. Karen, standing on the edge of the property, clipboard in hand, pretending to check her phone, but she was watching me. When our eyes met, she smiled, that same perfect, practiced, untouchable smile. And right then, I made a promise to myself. If she wanted a wedding on my land, she was going to remember it for the rest of her life. I woke up that morning to the sound of trucks, big ones. At first, I thought one of my neighbors had a delivery, but when I looked out the window, my jaw dropped. The gravel road to my pasture was lined with white vans marked Elite Events Catering and Windsor Weddings and Rentals. There were decorators setting up white arches, floral garlands, and golden chairs on my land. At first, I thought maybe I was dreaming. I threw on my boots, stomped across the field, and sure enough, there she was, Karen, dressed in a wide-brimmed sun hat and pink blazer, barking orders like she owned the place. She was pointing toward my barn like it was her personal backdrop. "Excuse me," I shouted, "what the hell is going on here?" Karen turned, gave me that same syrupy smile that made my blood boil and said, "Oh, there you are, sweetie. We're just setting up for the ceremony. Don't worry, we'll clean up after." "Clean up after?" I nearly choked. "You can't just come onto my farm and—" Before I could finish, she cut me off. "Technically, this area is shared community property under the extended jurisdiction of the HOA Common Lands. We have every right." I blinked. "Karen, this is my pasture. My cows graze here. That's a manure pit 50 feet from where your guests are going to stand." She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, please, it'll add rustic charm. The photographer loves the backdrop." I swear I could feel steam coming out of my ears. The nerve of this woman. She had invaded my farm, trespassed on private property, and was now acting like I was the one being unreasonable. Then came her next line, the one that made me see red. And if you could, please keep the animals penned in the lower field tomorrow. We don't want the smell ruining the ceremony. The mayor's daughter is in attendance and I'd rather not have complaints. That's when I realized this wasn't just about some overconfident HOA president playing pretend. She had political people coming. She wanted this to be her moment, a high-profile, picture-perfect wedding on my land so she could brag about it at the next board meeting. I kept my voice calm though my hands were shaking. Karen, you have until sunset to pack up and leave, or I call the sheriff. Her smile faded. Oh, don't be dramatic, it's just one day, and if you try to interfere, I'll file a nuisance complaint with the county. You'll be in violation of community standards for aggressive behavior. I almost laughed out loud. Aggressive behavior? I was about 2 seconds from tossing her wedding cake into the manure pit myself. But instead, I turned around, headed back to my farmhouse, and sat on the porch with my dog, Duke, trying to think straight. My gut screamed that calling the sheriff would be useless. Karen had friends in every corner of the county board. The last time I reported her, they sent a deputy who just shrugged and said it was a civil matter. That's when it hit me, I didn't need to call anyone. I knew this land better than anyone. And if Karen wanted to turn my farm into then she'd have to deal with the realities of farm life. So that night, I started planning. I walked the perimeter with my flashlight, checking every drainage line, every trench, and the old irrigation valves that ran near the field. They hadn't been used in years, but I knew one thing: if I opened them all at once, that pasture would flood faster than a politician's promises. The manure pit, too, was nearly full. The rain from last week had mixed everything into a thick, brown soup. Normally, I'd call the pump truck to clear it out, but this time I had a different use in mind. When the moonlight hit the surface of that pit, I couldn't help but grin. Karen had no idea what she'd stepped into, literally. The next morning, I played it cool. I waved at her crew as they set up tables, pretending to be the friendly neighbor. Karen even gave me a smug little nod as if she'd won. But behind that calm face, I was already counting down the hours. Because tomorrow, when her guests arrived in their fancy dresses and shiny shoes, this farm was going to give them a wedding they'd never forget. And I'd make sure Karen's perfect day ended in a storm of her own making. The morning before the wedding, I woke up to the sound of laughter and music drifting across the pasture. Karen's crew was already in full swing, tents going up, flowers being hung, lights strung across my fence posts like some kind of country fair. I sipped my coffee on the porch, watching it all unfold like a movie. If this were someone else's land, I might found it funny, but this was my farm, my rules, and Karen had pushed her luck one step too far. I grabbed my old baseball cap, whistled for Duke, and headed to the barn. Today wasn't just any day, it was setup day, my setup day. Now, to understand what I was about to do, you've got to know one thing: farms run on systems. Pipes, pumps, drains, it's all a network. And when you've worked the land as long as I have, you know how to make those systems work for you. I started with the irrigation valves. They ran under the field where Karen's wedding tent was planted like a flag of conquest. Each valve connected to the old manure pit runoff line, normally sealed tight, but that day I loosened them just enough to prime them for flow. All it would take was one turn of a handle to send everything rushing through the lower trench. Next, I checked the old water pump near the barn. It hadn't been used in ages, but the motor still hummed to life when I flipped the switch. Good. That meant the flood would run smooth when the time came. Then came the real work. I headed to the manure pit, thick, dark, bubbling at the surface from weeks of decomposition. Not exactly perfume, but to me it smelled like poetic justice. The pit connected to a runoff trench that snaked toward the same lower field, and right now that trench was dry. I spent half the morning making sure the route was clear, digging out clogs, repositioning the drainage gates. By noon, I had a perfect flow path ready to deliver Karen's wedding surprise. But I wasn't done, oh no. Karen's crew had been stomping all over my land since sunrise. One guy was hanging banners off my fence while another was driving stakes right through my grass. I walked over casually, chewing a piece of straw. "Hey fellas," I said with a smile, "just make sure you don't block that ditch there, it's for water drainage." The guy nodded without even looking up. Perfect, they didn't suspect a thing. As I turned to head back to the house, I saw Karen standing near the tent, holding a clipboard like she was running a presidential campaign. She spotted me and strutted over, her heels sinking slightly into the soft ground. "Lovely, isn't it?" she said, sweeping her arm toward the decorations. "You'll be glad to know the HOA voted to reimburse you for use of your property, assuming everything goes smoothly." Goes smoothly, huh? I said, doing my best to keep from laughing. Oh yes, she continued. Tomorrow's going to be magical, the whole community's coming, even the mayor might drop by. Imagine your humble little farm hosting the biggest wedding of the year. I gave her my best poker face, yeah, imagine that. She smiled, patted my arm like I was a child, and walked off to direct her minions. The second she was out of sight, I muttered under my breath, oh, it's gonna be magical, all right. By sundown, the entire setup was complete. White chairs lined up in neat rows, flowers arching over the aisle, fairy lights twinkling across the field. If you didn't know any better, you'd think it was paradise. But I knew what lay beneath that picture-perfect ground, a ticking time bomb of cow manure and irrigation water just waiting for my signal. I spent the evening double-checking everything. The valves were ready, the pump was primed. The trench was clear. I even tested the flow with a little water just to make sure nothing was clogged. Worked like a charm. When I finally went inside, I could still see the glow of the wedding lights flickering through my window. Duke was lying at my feet and I scratched behind his ears. Tomorrow, boy, I whispered, tomorrow we take back the farm. I lay in bed that night listening to the hum of generators and distant chatter from Karen's crew. But beneath that noise, I heard something else. The faint, steady gurgle of the irrigation lines under the soil. Everything was ready. And as the clock ticked past midnight, I couldn't help but grin. Because by tomorrow afternoon, when the music started and the bride walked down that aisle, they'd all learn the same lesson Karen had ignored from the start. You don't mess with a farmer on his own land. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like the air, holding its breath before a storm. I brewed my coffee slow, watching the sun stretch over the hills, lighting up the tents Karen's crew had set up like an over-the-top festival. Rows of white chairs gleamed, the tables were draped in silk, and that ridiculous floral arch stood proudly in front of my old barn like it was part of some royal estate. Karen must been up since dawn. Her car was already parked by the fence, and she was packing in that pink dress of hers, phone glued to her ear, snapping at the poor decorators. I could practically hear her voice from my porch. No, the roses go there, not next to the cow pen. What's wrong with you people? Duke sat beside me, tail flicking lazily, watching the chaos. Don't worry, boy, I said, patting his head. By sundown, she'll have all the roses she can handle. Around 10 o'clock, cars started rolling in, luxury sedans, SUVs, even a stretch limo that looked ridiculous against the dusty country road. The guests started piling out in their glittering clothes and designer shoes, clutching champagne glasses like they were attending some high society gala instead of trespassing on a working farm. And then came the music. A string quartet, can you believe it? Out there in the middle of my pasture, their bows dancing over violins as the cows stared from the distance like confused spectators. I watched from the barn doorway, sipping my coffee, pretending to be a curious onlooker. A few guests smiled and waved politely. I waved back, if only they knew what was coming. By noon, everything was in motion. The officiant was fussing over his script, the caterers were panicking about flies, and the heat was starting to make those pretty white flowers droop. Karen, however, was beaming. She strutted across the aisle, bossing everyone around, her clipboard tucked under her arm like a general before battle. Perfect, she said loudly to the crowd. Absolutely perfect. This is the most beautiful wedding venue in the county, don't you think? Someone clapped, another cheered. I nearly choked on my coffee. Then she spotted me leaning on the barn fence. Oh, she called out with a wave. Glad you could join, neighbor. Please keep the animals out of sight, okay? We're starting in 15 minutes. Sure thing, I said with a grin. Wouldn't want to ruin the show. She smiled, satisfied, and walked away none the wiser. Now here where timing mattered. The irrigation pump was hidden behind the barn, and the valve line stretched under the ground right toward the center of the ceremony area. I'd already tested everything last night. All I needed to do was open the master valve and let the pressure do the rest. The bride's music started, soft piano chords echoing over the field. Everyone stood. Cameras rose in the air. Karen clasped her hands together, eyes glistening with joy. And that's when I turned the handles. It started slow, a low gurgle like water moving through pipes. Nobody noticed at first, but then the ground began to darken. Guests looked down, frowning. The soft green grass turned brownish, then wet, then squelchy. A woman gasped, someone lifted their shoe already covered in mud, then the smell hit. It rolled in like a wave, thick, earthy, unmistakable, cow manure mixed with warm sun and perfume. Within seconds, screams erupted. The orchestra stopped mid-note, chairs toppled. Expensive shoes sank an inch into the soggy ground. And then, like a bad punchline, one of the irrigation outlets burst open, spraying a jet of brown liquid right across the aisle. Karen froze, the smile vanished from her face. She blinked once, twice, and then splat. A full splash of manure water arced through the air and hit the side of her pink dress. Pandemonium, guests tripped over chairs, the bride screamed. The groom tried to pull her away, but his polished shoes slipped and they both went down right into the mud. I couldn't help it, I laughed, full belly laugh. Duke barked like he was cheering me on. Karen whirled around, shrieking, You did this. I shrugged, I told you not to use the field, drainage problem. She stomped toward me, her heels sinking deeper with each step until she gave up and yanked them off, clutching them in her hand. You'll pay for this, she shouted, her voice cracking. Funny, I said, that's what you told me when you fined me for painting my barn red. Cameras were still rolling, guests filming everything on their phones. Karen's perfect day was turning into a viral disaster in real time. By the time the sheriff showed up, half the guests had fled, the music had stopped, and the white tent was a brown, sagging mess. The officer just stood there, shaking his head. What in the world happened here? Karen pointed at me, dripping and furious. He sabotaged my wedding. The sheriff turned to me, clearly trying not to smile. You got proof of that, ma'am. She sputtered, waving her muddy clipboard. It's his land, he flooded it. The sheriff raised an eyebrow. Then maybe you shouldn't have had a wedding on private property without permission. For once, Karen had no comeback. I leaned on the fence, arms crossed. Guess you'll be filing another complaint, huh? She glared, trembling with rage. This isn't over. Oh, I know, I said, but it sure smells like it is. The next morning, the smell still hung in the air like a bad memory. Even after the sun came up, you could see streaks of brown across the grass, wilted flowers, and muddy footprints leading all the way to the road. The cows looked amused, I swear, standing near the fence like they were watching the aftermath of a tornado they'd caused. I leaned on the porch rail, coffee in hand, just soaking in the silence. No music, no chatter, no wedding planners barking orders, just the soft hum of the farm and the distant sound of someone yelling on a phone. It was Karen. She was still out there, standing near her mud-caked car, covered in dried stains from yesterday's chaos. Her perfect pink dress was now blotched brown. She was holding her phone in one hand, packing back and forth like a general regrouping after losing a war. I don't care what it takes, she shouted. I want him fined, arrested, whatever, he destroyed my property. Her property, I almost laughed right there. A few hours later, a county inspector showed up, a guy named Randall who I'd known for years. Good man, quiet type, the kind who'd rather fish than deal with HOA drama. He pulled up in his dusty pickup, stepped out, and immediately pinched his nose. Good Lord, son, he said, what happened here? A wedding, I said. He raised an eyebrow, a weddings. Yep, Karen's, she thought my pasture was part of the HOA commons. Randall looked out across the destroyed field, shaking his head. Doesn't look like it ended well. She didn't invite the cows, I said with a grin. He tried not to laugh but failed halfway through. You know she's filed a formal complaint against you, right? Said you sabotaged the event with, He looked down at his clipboard. Intentional manure flooding. Intentional, I said, pretending to look offended. That's a serious accusation. Randall smirked. Don't worry, she sent pictures as proof. All they really show is her trespassing on your land. Sheriff's department already confirmed it's private property. Figures. He signed off on a few papers, told me to keep a copy, and drove off. But I knew Karen wasn't done. She never stopped until she got her way or until she crashed trying. Sure enough, by that afternoon, a letter arrived in my mailbox. A big official-looking envelope with the HOA's fancy gold seal. I opened it right there and out fell 3 sheets of nonsense. Accusations of vandalism, property damage, community endangerment, you name it. But tucked at the bottom was the kicker. A $25,000 fine for gross negligence resulting in event loss. I burst out laughing so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Karen really thought she could fine me for ruining her illegal wedding on my land. That night, I decided to end this war once and for all. I went into my office, opened my old filing cabinet, and pulled out a set of documents I'd kept tucked away for years, the original property survey maps. I scanned them under the desk lamp, tracing the lines that marked my land boundaries. And there it was, clear as day, the HOA border stopped 300 feet short of my pasture. Everything she used for her wedding, including the barn, the irrigation ditch, and that manure pit, was fully mine. Not just by county line, by deeds. The next morning, I made a few calls to the sheriff, the county recorder, and a local reporter who loved nothing more than a juicy HOA scandal. By noon, a small caravan of cars rolled up my driveway. Karen must seen them because she came marching over, sunglasses on, trying to look composed despite the brown stains still splattered on her shoes. "What's all this?" she demanded. I smiled. "Oh, just some folks from the county. Thought they'd like to clear up a misunderstanding about the land lines." Her jaw tightened. "You can't just..." But then Randall, the inspector from the day before, held up a map. "Actually, ma'am, we can, and it looks like your event was entirely outside HOA jurisdiction. You had no legal right to host it here." Karen's face went pale. And he added, "Since the damage and cleanup costs fall under your name, the county will be billing your HOA for property restoration." I swear if looks could kill, I'd have been 6 feet under right there. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'll smell better than your wedding did." That line almost made Randall snort coffee out his nose. By evening, the news had spread through the whole town. HOA president fined for trespassing farm during wedding disaster, read the headline. Photos of the mud-soaked guests, the ruined tent, and Karen's dripping pink dress were everywhere online. I didn't have to post anything. The internet did the job for me. For the first time since she moved into the neighborhood, Karen went silent. No emails, no fines, no HOA memos, just quiet. I figured the story was over. But as I sat on the porch that night, watching the stars blink over the fields, I had no idea that Karen wasn't done just yet. Because when people like her lose power, they don't go away quietly. They scheme, they plot, and the next move she made. Well, it was bold, real bold. I should known Karen wouldn't just fade away. The woman had a kind of stubbornness that could outlast a cockroach in a nuclear blast. For a few blessed days, things were quiet. No HOA letters, no clipboard patrols, no screeching voice echoing across the fence line. I almost started to believe she'd learned her lesson. Then one morning I saw a for sale sign by my driveway, not on her property, on mine. At first I thought maybe some prankster had done it, but the fine print said, "HOA approved community expansion zone, contact President Karen Miller for inquiries." My jaw locked. She was trying to sell my land. I stormed over to her house, Duke trotting beside me like he knew there was a storm coming. When she opened the door, she was in full politician mode, hair perfect, smile plastic. "Well," she said sweetly, "good morning, neighbor. I see you've noticed our plans for future development. We're working to bring value to the area." "Value?" I snapped. "You mean theft? You're trying to sell land that isn't yours." Her smile didn't even flicker. "Actually, we've submitted a reclassification proposal to the county. Since your property borders HOA territory, we believe it qualifies as shared community land, at least temporarily." I stared at her. "You mean the same land where you hosted your wedding disaster?" "That was an unfortunate misunderstanding," she said, folding her arms. "But I won't let your hostility block community progress." I laughed, an honest, slow, from-the-belly laugh. "Karen, you do realize every inch of that land is deeded under my name, right? You can reclassify it all you want on your little HOA map. Doesn't change what's on record." She took a step closer, lowering her voice. "You embarrassed me in front of the entire county. I lost my position as HOA chair because of you. You think I'll just let that go?" "Oh, I'm counting on you not letting it go," I said. "Makes life more entertaining." And with that, I walked off because the more she talked, the more I realized she'd already lost. Still, something in her tone made me uneasy. Karen wasn't just angry, she was desperate. That night, I got my answers. Around midnight, Duke started barking like crazy. Headlights flashed through the window. I grabbed my coat and went outside, and there they were, a small team of contractors in reflective vests, unloading surveying equipment and fencing materials. Karen stood beside them, clipboard in hand, shouting, "Measure from the fence line, we'll start construction here." "Karen," I yelled, stomping toward her, "you're trespassing again." She spun around, smiling like she'd won the lottery. "Oh, don't worry, this is all legal now. Temporary construction authorization from the HOA for drainage maintenance." "Drainage maintenance," I said, raising an eyebrow, "at midnight." She hesitated. "We work fast." That was all I needed to hear. I pulled out my phone and dialed the sheriff's number directly, the same one who dealt with her after the wedding. Within 20 minutes, 2 cruisers rolled up, lights flashing. The deputies got out, looked at the equipment, then at me. "Same lady," one of them asked. "The same one," I said. Karen's confidence cracked. "This is harassment. I'm maintaining community land." The deputy sighed. "Ma'am, we've already confirmed with the county that this property doesn't belong to your HOA. You're trespassing again." When they escorted her to the car again, she kept shouting, "You can't stop progress. You'll regret this." But this time, the only thing she was progressing toward was another fine and a trespassing charge. A week later, I got a call from Randall, the county inspector. "Thought you'd like to know," he said. "The HOA dissolved. Karen's been barred from holding any leadership position for 5 years." I smiled so wide my cheeks hurt. Guess her career went down the drain, too. He chuckled pretty much. After that, things finally settled. The field dried up, the grass grew back, and I fixed the irrigation lines so they'd never burst again, unless I wanted them to. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I still sit on the porch with Duke, watching the sunset over the same field that hosted the most infamous wedding in county history. The internet still brings it up now and then, the mud wedding, they call it. Some folks even drive by just to take pictures. And every once in a while, I catch a glimpse of Karen driving past in her spotless white SUV, eyes straight ahead, pretending not to see me. I always raise my coffee mug and smile. Because in the end, I didn't just win. I reminded her and everyone else that no matter how many rules and HOA rights, out here on my farm, nature and common sense always have the final say. And if anyone ever forgets that again, well, let's just say the irrigation system's still fully operational. Every HOA has a story on HOA Headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.